Let's be honest, 2021 was not the year a majority of us wanted. Coming out of 2020, we all had this wild hope that we were on the better end of a pandemic and that we could go back to some sort of normal. That, unfortunately, wasn't the case, and as someone who talks about the Walt Disney Company and everything under its umbrella, I paid attention to how the year was going. It was a year of ups and downs for sure. That's typical of any year, but the downs were, at times, rock bottom for Disney, and their ups never soared to the heights they probably hoped for. My name's Josh Taylor, this is Modern Mouse, and today I want to take a retrospective look at Disney's 2021. What worked, what didn't work, and what we might be able to expect in the future. Since there's so much to go over, I thought I would cover each division of Disney separately. I'll look at each of Disney's film and television divisions, as well as the domestic US theme parks. I won't be able to get to every single news story that happened at Disney in 2021, so if you know something and you think it was important, leave a comment down below and tell me why. Let's start with Disney proper, both their live action and animation divisions, and we'll definitely be talking a lot about Disney Plus. The streaming service was a big part of Disney's year, and realistically, it's going to be a major part of the company moving forward. Disney's two major live action films, Cruella and The Jungle Cruise, were both simultaneously in theaters and available to purchase through the Disney Plus premium service. The same was done for their animated film Raya and the Last Dragon. All three of these films, despite getting critical praise, ended up losing money, or at best breaking even. In my most recent Animated Film Eras Explained revision, I said that we had left the revival era of Disney animation and had moved into a streaming era, but I actually don't think that's the case any longer. And I don't think that Disney does either, because their last film of the year, Encanto, wasn't put on Disney Plus right away when it hit theaters in November. Instead, the film had 30 days of being exclusive to movie theaters prior to it being on Disney Plus. The result was mildly better than the other films I talked about that went to Disney Plus's premium access service. The film made back its budget, but overall it wasn't a good year for these films. Not just Disney, but really in general. And I'm talking about 20th Century, as well as Warner Brothers and Sony and everyone else. Many people were still not sure if they wanted to visit a movie theater during a pandemic, and that makes sense. Top that off with the unemployment status that a lot of people have and the cheap offerings that come with streaming services at home, and really people didn't have a reason to go to a movie theater or pay up the extra $30 for the premium access Disney was asking for. But I think that Pixar follows up in an even worse way. In 2020, Disney chose to move onward from theaters to Disney Plus when theaters were closing down in March of 2020. That made sense, but it wasn't given the premiere access treatment like many of Disney's films were, so it just straight up lost money. The same could be said for Soul, which just went straight to Disney Plus during Christmas of that year. And for 2021, Pixar's only release was Luca, which yet again went straight to Disney Plus without the premiere access treatment. That's 3 films in a row where Pixar took a major financial loss with no ability to recoup any of those finances. There were reports of Pixar's animation team being upset and frustrated, and I really don't blame them. Luca was announced to be on Disney Plus back at the beginning of 2021, and in the interim between when it was announced and when it actually came out, there were plenty of films that moved to theaters. Luca was just not one of them, and it didn't really make sense to me. It was a great film, and a lot of people loved it on Disney Plus, but the frustration has to be there for the cast and crew. For me, not putting Luca on the premiere access side of Disney Plus was a real bummer. Disney held their own films to a higher standard, and people had to pay $30 extra to see their films as first-run movies, which made Pixar, where you didn't have to pay that extra money, look like second-class citizens. In fact, I made a whole video about Luca and it not costing $30 for the premiere access and why Disney was doing Pixar a disservice by not doing that. Anyways, if you want to see that video, I'll link it in the description down below. Hopefully sometime in the near future, Pixar can return to movie theaters and to this larger status, to the animation company that we all regarded them as before. Along with Pixar though, the biggest news of the year was the other major disappointment in the animation world, which was the closing of Blue Sky Studios. In February of 2021, Disney announced that due to the economic impact of the pandemic, it could not sustain a third animation brand, and that they would be closing Blue Sky Studios permanently. The studio officially closed in April, and while the pandemic may have been a good excuse to close down the studio, it wasn't really a good excuse for Disney to take the studio's old films and repurpose them for social media content so quickly after their closing. It's also a bit upsetting that Disney is continuing the Ice Age franchise without the studio that started it. There are a few people working on that film, like writer Jim Hecht, but overall, this isn't a good look for Disney and might be one of the biggest points of serious concern for the company under Bob Chapek's running. Moving on to better items, let's talk about Star Wars. The Bad Batch happened, and the Book of Boba Fett premiered on Disney Plus just at the end of the year. Honestly, it was nice not to see so much Star Wars or Lucasfilm in general this year, especially with it being such a part of major discourse year after year ever since I've known Star Wars. Star Wars was still around in pop culture thanks to book releases, but as far as film and television, they were kind of low-key in 2021. Of course, there's the Star Wars Galactic Star Cruiser experience and hotel to talk about. It doesn't premiere until 2022, but a lot of promotion went into it in 2021, so I feel like we need to talk about it, but we'll get to that. One of the brightest spots of the year, though, was Marvel Studios. 5 different TV shows and 4 films kept Marvel in the limelight throughout the entire year. Spider-Man No Way Home, a collaboration with Sony Pictures, became the highest grossing movie of 2021, and the year began with WandaVision being kind of a water cooler show that everyone was talking about. Longtime Marvel fans and newcomers both jumped on board with the WandaVision train, and it was just really fun to theorize with everybody. I remember waking up at like 3 in the morning to watch this show so that I wouldn't be spoiled by the time I was supposed to get up at like 7 a.m. It was insane and fun, and I kind of missed those weeks where that show was running. I do think that Marvel overdid it though. As each show debuted on Disney Plus, each got less and less buzz. By the time that we got to Hawkeye at the end of the year, the Marvel TV shows just weren't getting talked about as major pop culture events anymore. Which is a shame because Hawkeye was pretty darn good actually. As for Marvel's films, despite Spider-Man being the biggest film of the year, Marvel's other outings were not major successes. Shang-Chi and Eternals did okay in theaters, but with such major saturation of Marvel throughout the year, they both got lost in the shuffle. Marvel's biggest miss of the year, though, follows up with what happened at Pixar and has likely changed the dynamics of how Disney will release films in the future. Black Widow was just a big mess. The film itself is fine, not a blowaway success story, but not the worst of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But the behind-the-scenes drama around the movie was such a major deal. Like Raya and the Last Dragon, Cruella, and the Jungle Cruise, this movie was put out in theaters as well as on Premiere Access with Disney+. The problem with that is the contract status of the film's stars. Scarlett Johansson in particular spoke up about her disapproval of the film going to the Disney+ streaming service, since a part of her contract allows her to get a percentage of the film's box office takeaway. Obviously, nobody predicted that there would be a giant pandemic when Scarlett Johansson signed on to play Black Widow in the film Black Widow. But it does show the neglect and panic that Disney had when all of a sudden all of the movie theaters had to shut down. Of course, the buck ends at Disney with new CEO Bob Chapek, but I think this is less about the job he's doing and more about the changing landscape for the movie industry. It provided clear evidence that the industry is not yet ready to fully swing away from the movie theater experience, and that making films and TV shows that are exclusive to a streaming service is not yet a profitable way to do business. Other major news at Disney really had to do with their theme parks, something that I haven't talked a lot about on this channel in recent years, and something I'd like to get back to in the future since I live about 10 minutes away from Disneyland, and I did make a trip to Walt Disney World this year. And don't worry, I took as many precautions as I could. I went on days with minimal crowds and tried to stay away from people, but in going to both Disneyland and Walt Disney World this year, I did learn a few things. I can firmly say that Disney and really any of the theme park companies are just winging it and don't really have any solutions when it comes to dealing with a pandemic. At Walt Disney World, I witnessed a lack of organization around when and where to have masks on. The breaking up of large crowds just didn't exist, and creating the classic Disney magic during a pandemic was truly difficult. I spent less than a full week in Orlando, and to be honest, the treatment of the pandemic between Southern California, where I live, and Central Florida was stunning. California definitely has their fair share of people who unapologetically break rules by not wearing a mask when it's required, or by unwillingly taking any precautions whatsoever. But Florida really was a different beast. I actually was stuck inside the Haunted Mansion queue area for about 10 minutes while a family and a cast member had a war of words because the family just refused to wear a mask. As much fun as I had on that trip, I also had a lot of anxiety and noticed the worst in people, more often than I probably ever did anytime during the COVID-19 pandemic. I was actually at Walt Disney World for the launch of their 50th anniversary in October. Unfortunately, that celebration never felt as grand as it could have been. I really enjoyed seeing the 50th celebration statues everywhere, and honestly, they were a personal highlight. And the opening of Remy's Ratatouille adventure added a much needed addition to Epcot. It was also just an amazing experience personally on that attraction, but everything else felt either out of place during a pandemic or was lackluster in its reveal. I heard that the Magic Kingdom's new nighttime show, Enchanted, and the new Epcot show, Harmonious, were beautiful, but I couldn't tell you because there were so many people looking to see those shows that I just wasn't interested in being part of a shoulder-to-shoulder crowded walkway to see it. I think that's the unfortunate part of having the 50th celebration of Walt Disney World in 2021. A lot of people wanted to come, and a lot of people wanted to see it, but it just became a lackluster celebration. And it was also clear that part of the 50th celebration's problem was that there was still construction going on. There were several things that were planned to have been opened by the time that the 50th celebration started, but because everything had been delayed due to a pandemic, there was still plenty of construction happening around the resort, including the Tron coaster at Tomorrowland, which has continued to halt the iconic Magic Kingdom Railroad from operating, and at Epcot, where it seems like a good chunk of the park isn't operational at all. It's disappointing. In fact, Epcot is in such need of more attractions and things to do since so much of it's closed to construction, that when the Three Caballeros attraction had an animatronic Donald malfunction, they just replaced the animatronic with a plant so that the ride could continue operating rather than having to shut it down. It was a plant wearing a sombrero. Over on the West Coast, Disneyland opened after being closed for over a year. Unlike Walt Disney World, which opened after just a few months of being closed, Disneyland had to stick with state requirements. And after having visited both parks, honestly, I think keeping it closed was the right call. The park reopened with a reimagined version of the Snow White attraction, which got renamed Snow White's Enchanted Wish, and it's glorious. Avengers Campus also opened this year, and while I like the new Land of California Adventure, I know many people don't care for it, and I'll call that a wash. I do think it was great to see so many Marvel characters pop up in this land as they were introduced on TV or at the movies in 2021. Of course, seeing Spider-Man fly is an absolute highlight. Disneyland's major issues after reopening all stem from their new reservation system, though. While I think that reservations are much needed to keep crowd levels down, how Disney handled the rollout of that system, along with their new Magic Key annual passes and single-day tickets, lacked cohesion. And ultimately, they got sued for giving misinformation about what you could or could not do with your tickets or passes when it came to booking reservations. On top of the new reservation system at the theme parks, Disney launched the Genie and Genie Plus systems, which were supposed to help resort guests navigate the theme parks on both the East Coast and West Coast, and would allow them to buy lightning lane tickets like fast passes to skip lines on certain attractions. While I'm not one to complain about the additional price tag for this service, since I was familiar with the similar plan at Disneyland beforehand with Max Pass, I have to critique it for changing and evolving far too quickly. Nearly as soon as it launched, certain attractions were added to the Genie Plus lineup seasonally, and then they were said to be taken back off of it, to be separate Lightning Lane purchases. It's all just a bit frustrating and confusing to follow. If I had one major takeaway from my experiences at Walt Disney World and Disneyland, it's that the experience now is just overly complicated. All of these new systems that are required now put a lot of stress on park guests and emphasizes a lot of planning long before you even go on vacation or arrive at the front gate. Rather than just enjoying your day with friends and family, Disney seems to be requiring guests to download an app for their phone so that they can choose one of far too many options to navigate the theme parks with. Add on top of that the ability to mobile order food or to check out your merchandise through your phone and all these other ways to do things. It's just a lot. Overall, I think that Disney used the closures of both movie theaters and theme parks as an excuse to try out some new things. The company worked out some kinks in 2021, hopefully setting them up for a better future. I won't comment on the future opening of the Galactic Star Cruiser since it hasn't opened yet, but I will say that the advertising campaign around it has not been good. Like with the Disney Plus Premier Access or Genie systems, this new hotel and live-action role-play hybrid is something completely new for Disney, and it seems like they aren't sure how to promote it. Which is unfortunate, since the concept seems fantastic. Again, I refuse to pass judgment until it's fully up and operational. I know that plenty of people will pit 2021's downfalls on the new CEO Bob Chapek. And while he deserves criticism, he also took over one of the largest entertainment organizations during a time period filled with uncertainty. He's had to make choices that ultimately didn't benefit anyone because the world just needed those decisions to be made. While I would love to say that the theme parks should have been closed for much longer, I also understand that a ton of people depend on a paycheck from going to work at those parks. I understand why they asked Disney Plus subscribers to pay an extra $30 to see a first-run movie, instead of asking them to all go to a movie theater, because that just doesn't suit everyone's needs. But they also didn't take everybody into consideration when they made those decisions. I hope that as the years go by and things return to some sort of normal, whenever that is, that Bob Chapek becomes wiser and better and people do see him as a great leader. But overall, 2021 was not a really great year for the Walt Disney Company. There were moments of greatness for sure, but overall, I think the company expected a lot more out of this year, and unfortunately, they just couldn't plan for it. Disney's reputation as a company also took a major hit in Hollywood and amongst theme park enthusiasts. Like any company in 2021, Disney was put in a tough spot, and hopefully, as things get back to normal and things get better, they can return to what they used to be. The company that creates magic. Like I said at the beginning, I did not cover all of Disney's major news stories. That was just a lot to handle, but if you know of any, comment down below some of the major ones like the Disneyland union strike or I don't know, almost anything else. Comment down below, let me know. And in the meantime, if you want to check out another video, you can right here. And thank you for watching, my friends. See you next time, and as always, keep moving forward.